in association with Winston Baker. Thank you for being here. I'm Carol Medzer, RTSI 360 manager. So our second panel for the day will cover international co-production strategies for independent and commercial projects. So I'm pleased to welcome on stage Natan Bogin, founder and president and CEO of Hutzpah Co. USA. Natan was a talent and film finance agent at CIA before he started Hutzpah Media Partners, a hybrid of a production company and consulting firm specializing in packaging, advising, and selling international productions based in the US. I'll let Natan introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. There we go. Hi. So I don't know the order, but we have David Uslan from Los Angeles. I will let you introduce yourself in a second. We have Livia from Paris. We have Mohammed from Egypt. And we have George from Greece. So guys, welcome, welcome, welcome. So we're gonna dive into this for a while, and then we'll open up to you guys. Really, this is for everyone here. So we're all, I'll speak for all of us, very, very excited to be here in Saudi Arabia and here at the festival and get to know all of you. So let's dive into to the scene a little bit. The streaming platforms have propelled international talent and productions to take on a more predominant role on a global level. So local productions now here and infrastructures are thinking global. And in turn, the productions in the United States and in Europe specifically are looking at this region as a region full of opportunity. So we're lucky enough to have panelists from all over the world, Europe, US, Greece, and Egypt. And so it's going to be very interesting to get each and one of your perspective from your angle and from your business. So before we dive into specifics, maybe you each want to introduce yourselves and tell the audience where you're from and what you do. Maybe we can start with you, David.
Hi, guys. I'm David Uslan from Los Angeles, although I, like a bunch of these other panelists, spend a lot of time traveling across the world. I spend a lot of time here in the MENA region. I spend a lot of time in Asia. And my family is in the content business, going back decades. We primarily work on content that fits into the franchise category, things that could be not only great movies and TV shows, but also have a thriving life in the publishing space, in the gaming space, in the immersive entertainment space, all of which are important in KSA and beyond. So I am honored to be here and can't wait to talk about all this.
Hello, I'm Livia van der Stey. I work at Wild Bunch International, which is an international sales company based in Paris. We mostly work in independent cinema, so with both well-established directors in the festival circuit, such as Ken Loach, the Darden Brothers, Koreda, Miyazaki, and also looking for new talents such as Julia Ducournau, Audrey Liwan, and Lajli. So we work on both French cinema and international, and our core business is international sales, but we've also been developing co-production over the last few years.
Hi everybody, Mohammed Hafzi, I'm from Egypt. Mainly I work in production, mostly film, as well as television sometimes. I come from a writing background, so I started out as a scriptwriter back in around 1999. I feel old when I say that, but that is a fact. And since 2005, founded Film Clinic, which is started out just producing for upcoming Egyptian talent and directors. Then gradually became more of a regional player, working on co-productions with different Arab countries and with France and Europe, UK, US. So we've done almost 40 films, and in the past, I guess, 15 years. and those include films that we fully produced or minority co-productions. Ventured into also the distribution and sales of Arab films, independent Arab titles since 2017. And I guess part of our DNA is really working with a lot of first-time filmmakers. So I guess more than half the films we've been involved in were probably first-time directors. And yeah, so we're very excited to be here looking at new opportunities with Saudi and Arab talents. So thank you.
Hello, good morning. I'm George Christopoulos from Athens, Greece. Obvious from my accent, I assume. I'm a talent agent of composers, Swat Busnak. She was in the previous panel. Some of you were here, I see. She's my client. So I represent film composers internationally. I started the business in 2010. And since a couple of years after, I realized that with international co-productions, and since my niche is, my focus niche is independent international cinema, indie cinema, I had to have many different nationalities even at my roster. That's why I represent 20 different nationalities from all over the world. Of course, they have to be talented artists, but they have sometimes to fill certain tax residency criteria. So that's part of the perspective why I have to have so many talents from all over the world. And yeah, we are involved mainly in cinema, and international co-productions is part of that most of the time, really, that we have to service.
Very cool. So coming from all parts of the world, and what I find interesting is our panelists are both in the independent space and in the studio space. So in terms of co-production, and especially getting their perspective on Saudi and the region in general is going to be very interesting. So what I'm interested is really from your perspective and from your side of the business, how are you looking at Saudi specifically and out the region in terms of your business? And what are the opportunities that you see here and the challenges that you see?
So I come from the content side, really, of this business, and the start of any good co-production, in my mind, is finding content that really resonates between those countries that you're bringing into that project, where that content is originating from, who's involved from an early packaging side, really making it a natural fit, right, to what you want to do. And I spend a lot of time in places like Saudi looking for that content that we can build off of. You guys should all be proud that there are events here like the regional Comic-Cons in the area, these film festivals where it's a great resource to find local content. And I've been surprised, my father's been surprised over the last number of years with the quality of, again, the publishing content, the gaming content that's being created in this region. And that's where we're hunting down the next great IP to adapt into franchises. So I'll continue to spend a lot of time here, but if we're going to make great films that involve this country, there has to be some real natural connecting piece to it, and there is not a better place to look for that than the content side.
So for us, the opportunities are on many levels. From a sales perspective, the fact that this is basically a new market for us, and it's quickly expanding with a growing audience, and moreover, very young compared to European audience. So it's very interesting for us to discover this new market from a sales perspective, and more specifically because of its young audience as well, and there's more theaters being built here every day. So this is very exciting for us and stimulating in terms of discovering the tastes of this new audience. And it's also interesting from a talent's perspective, because with more audience, there's going to be also an emerging of new talents and voices, which is really what we're looking for in our company. as I was saying, we're trying to discover always new directors, and so this is very interesting in that sense as well. We've been working with Middle Eastern directors for a long time, like Nadine Levaki, Ziad Doueri, the Makbalbaf family. So there's been a lot of Middle Eastern directors, but never Saudi. So we're really looking forward to discover their talents. And it's also interesting in terms of production because of the incentives of the regions to produce here. With the tax rebate, which I think is 40%. So on these many different levels, there's a lot of opportunities to work together.
Well, I like to look at the the full half of the glass first. So I think I'll start with the opportunities because I think there are plenty. But first, I think we should just zoom out and just look at this region. I mean, we're talking about a population of 350 million people that speak the same language, despite different dialects and often different mindsets. But that is already a huge audience that we can cater to. It's also a very young population. So if you look at the Arab world, I think out of those 350 million, there's quite a big portion of young people who are very eager to consume content and to create content. And I sometimes people tell me in a film festival we don't like the word content. We make cinema. So but it is content. I mean, film, TV, reality, unscripted, anything. It's content. But for filmmakers here, I think the opportunities are huge because if you look at what's happening in this country, there's a real political will and drive to kickstart the film sector. Everybody knows about the incentives. Everybody knows about the different programs, and I think it's great to see a lot of people taking the opportunity. But having said that, I have to compare what's happening here to what's happening in a lot of other countries around the Arab world, and the picture is not as bright in some of our native countries that don't offer support. For example, I come from a country that that has a great tradition of cinema, more than 100 years. Filmmaking in Egypt, about 120 years, in fact. The third oldest film industry in the world, after France and the U.S. But there's no government support. We have issues with funding. We have issues with distribution, finance, censorship, and that is not just in Egypt. That is common across many other Arab countries. And I think that with a little bit of support, with a little bit of regulation of infrastructure, even things like talent agencies, they're just a new concept. 5 years ago or 10 years ago, when we tried to introduce the concept of talent agencies, producers were offended. Like this, you can't have a middleman, between me and the talent. I need to speak to the talent directly. But these are things that need to change. And as more regulation and as more government programs are being set in place to help the private sector, to help the creatives, the independents, to tell their stories, I think this is going to be a great help. But we should be looking at this as an industry, not as independent filmmakers trying to tell their own very personal stories without or with complete disregard to an audience. And I feel like this is what the Arab world is missing in a lot of circumstances, is that it's not yet an industry. It's not sustainable without subsidies, without without government intervention, without support. It's very hard to actually find the distribution channels and make the kinds of films that are going to give audiences trust. If you look at Saudi Arabia, the Saudi films that we've seen play in theaters in the past 2 years, with the exception of one film, all have been commercially unsuccessful, not able to reach an audience. Why is that? We need to look into these reasons. These are the kinds of challenges. It's not because they're bad films. Something needs to change. Something needs to be put into place. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of years. It's going to take a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of talent development, which is one of the subjects I'm definitely interested in. And in this festival, there's so much of that happening: talent development in the region, and the kinds of programs that are being put into place for that. So there's a lot to talk about, and I'm happy to be just at the very beginning of this push here.
There is. You have an interesting perspective because you've actually produced many co-productions between the region, EU and US. So you touched upon some interesting themes. We see here specifically in Saudi a lot of headlines about rebates and other incentives. Have you in your work already used those incentives or not yet? And then the other very interesting theme is the talent representation business as a whole here. How have you dealt with talent up to now in the region as opposed to elsewhere, and where do you see it going?
Well, in terms of the incentives, they're very new. You have to understand they've just been literally put into place, weeks or months ago, although they've been announced some time ago. So I'm in the middle of a Saudi production now that is, that we have applied for the rebate, and it's in process. So I do believe we will get the money. I hope, and it's looking like a very. It's going to end up being an efficient system, but all these incentives, you have to look at what happened in a lot of, like for example, Eastern European countries that have set up incentives and rebates in the past few years. It took some time for these incentives to actually be efficient. Some people, I know in even some productions that I was involved with, sometimes it's taken up to 2 years, to get the money. And there's always hurdles. There's always things to do with, providing the right documentation and, the cost reporting and the invoices and the contracts, etc. But that is a natural evolution of something that is just being set up. I mean, it's going to take time.
Which, when you're looking at it from your perspective, David, or yours, Livia, right? They're incentives that are very interesting and appealing, obviously, for productions, but those are also hurdles to overcome. How fast does it work? How efficient is it? Et cetera, et cetera. George?
I want to say as the middleman here, since you mentioned the word, because I am the middleman, all the challenges that Mo mentioned, they become from my position, an opportunity, especially because I'm very interested in what Livia said and Mohammed, to discover new talent and maybe, be close to them, nurture them to grow. And avoid some pitfalls, like you don't need to realize after years of trying on your own that you're not a producer who understands, what a cash rebate is. Maybe it's better to find a producer who understands, or you have to do your homework, your legwork, and if you do all of that and you have a mentor or some experienced people, then you can grow even further in your artist, as an artist too. And then you can have people that they trust you, like Mohammed, and then you find sales, and then you grow. So I think I like, as the middleman, to be early involved in the process of growing talent and growing their understanding of the mechanics of what is an international co-production. How does it work? What does it mean, a cash rebate? What does it mean, eligible costs? Or know that, for example, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is in such a focused way I mentioned with the talents in indie cinema, is that you have to know that Canada co-produces all the time with France, Belgium and Luxembourg, because it's a French-speaking territory. Or you have to know if Germany may co-produce with Austria and Switzerland, because it's German-speaking territory. Sometimes when they do that, they even change the script. Will it be, it was it's a real story. There was a story taken in the Alps, but which Alps? In the Salé in the Alps in Christmas. Is it the Swiss Alps, the Austrian Alps, or the Bavarian Alps? So depends who gives the most money. Who contributes the most money becomes the majority producer in the end. In that sense, they have to change the script even. So all of these things, when you are next to young talent that they have never co-produced, but they want because they see, funding can come from them, or there's a tax incentive there. I would like to be involved in order not to avoid headaches later. Because I don't want to be the person involved in the end of a production trying to find a solution. I would like to be with talents that I like and I trust, and they like me back, and we grow together their understanding and their projects too. So that's the opportunity I find here. Out of all these challenges in this kind of virgin territory, that we can all help the new talents understand what they're dealing with and do it right, really. That's the bottom line, I would say.
From my perspective, there are a lot of headlines. There's a lot of things happening here in Saudi and in the region, and I live in LA, and reading about it in America, every day you're reading new production companies and new players in the industry, and new incentives and things happening. A question for all of you, and I'll split it up kind of in two sections. How are you managing identifying all of these players, the key players, other players, talent? How are you kind of sorting through all of that? You, David, and you, Livia, and are you finding yourselves being able to be aware of the key people here to potentially work with? And if so, how? Through films that you've worked on, through people that you've worked with? How are you aware of the people to get in touch with here? And if you're not, what do you think should be put in place? And this is a perfect example, the Red Sea Film Festival, obviously, to really not only read about these headlines and these new companies and the news player, but really get to know them. And in turn, you, Mohammed, how, even though you're not in Saudi, but from your perspective, do you see someone like David and do you see someone like Livia? And how are you familiar with companies like Wild Bunch and big companies in the United States? Do you find easy access to them? Do you not? Can you speak a bit about that?
So, again, I come from a very specific niche part of this business, and in my humble opinion, the only way for me to succeed is to actually be here. It's the same mentality that my family took towards Asia a decade ago. You got to be here, and you have to make a real effort. And there is the kind of fake Hollywood effort, and then there's the real effort of actually getting on a plane, being here on a regular basis, socializing and making real friends and family here that you could rely on, that you know well, and that could become, not only a real partner, but like family to you in the region. And that family will be able to help guide you, hopefully, through the changes that are occurring here on the ground on a regular basis. In Los Angeles, we only get the information, typically, folks in our business only get the information through what they read, and that's no good. So you have to make an effort. That's why it's amazing that we're all in this room together, that this second Red Sea Film Festival is as amazing and popular as it is and will continue to grow, but this is what it's all about. And I wouldn't be able to succeed if we weren't all together in the same room doing this. So a real effort has to be made. On the flip side, I also, a part of that family needs to have people like this gentleman over here. Somebody that could be brought in creatively, that could help with the development process, the production process, who has experience on the ground, who understands the history, who can really contribute to the creative process and make it that natural fit. Same thing goes for music. I mean, music is like, just as important of a main character to a project is almost anything else. And being able to find that natural fit, for that specific content, for that region, that's an art form itself to find that right fit. So you start putting those pieces together, you spend time here, you got a better chance of doing it right, than doing it any other way.
Yes, I agree with that. We hear about the key players through, of course, media coverage, but there's only so much we can do by knowing them. What we really need to do is to come to these kinds of events to meet with them. From the experience we've had with people have been through the co-production we did with the region in general, and that can only be achieved by having the habits of meeting not only here but in international markets in general. And as David was saying, which I found very interesting, is about the development process, the creative aspect of it is that we might be able also to bring some insight for local projects to be exported by giving our experience as international players with local talents who would want to have their film travel internationally. So yeah, the most important part is really to meet people face to face in these kinds of events.
Well, to answer your question from the flip side, from our point of view as Arab producers or filmmakers, if I speak for myself, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, it would have been very difficult for me to meet people like them if it wasn't for festivals like this. And I remember the Dubai Film Festival used to be a great platform for connecting Arab filmmakers with their international counterparts and executives, etc. Maybe now it's easier for me because I've had the exposure. I've had films that have traveled, sold internationally, traveled to big festivals. I mean, yes, I've worked with Wild Bunch before in the past with maybe one film, but also maybe because I work closely with CAA, I'm repped, etc. So it's easy to have access to the big international companies. But for people who are attending this festival and are looking to make these kinds of connections, I think the experience I would give is that it's not the most difficult thing to meet key executives at key companies. The most executive thing is to be ready with a project that will attract attention. It's so easy to, if you're smart, if you do it right, to set up around the meetings, with top executives in LA, for example. But to have the credibility, you have to have the right material that you're going to present, and you have to know how to present it and how to package it. And it's not just about the idea, it's not just about the concept, and sometimes not even just about the script. It's how you package that script and how you present the value that is in that project, and how do you know what that value is, so that you know how you're going to recoup the money for your investors, etc. So it's a learning curve that takes years, but I think these kinds of events are crucial. And when I started the industry component of Cairo Film Festival, which I used to run for 4 years, it was about this. It was about making these kinds of connections. And Cairo Industry Days, which is the industry platform of the festival, was really the intention was to bring Arab filmmakers and Arab producers with international execs, distributors, funds, and festival programmers or organizers. And I think that is probably the best kind of experience you can take away from a festival like this one. So the Red Sea is doing great in that respect. And by the way, I really should mention this guy. You always think of agents as very difficult people that are very difficult to deal with. We made a deal in 2 seconds, right? In a film we just recently worked on.
Because of you.
it was so sometimes, like you said, if you have the right ambition, and if you really just want to help talents and want to create good stories, I think we will always find a way to make this happen with the right support. So,
yeah. Thank you, by the way. When I started out, I was going to Cannes and I was saying I'm an agent of composers, and they were asking me, what is that? Can we eat it? It was an unknown word almost. I was maybe the first to introduce myself as a talent agent to film festivals that they had, and that's the answer, as you obviously to your question. You have to have film festivals, and specifically that's the thing with co-productions. You have to have in these festivals specific events that's where I met them all. Development labs, networking labs, co-production labs. So I was going since 2012 as a consultant on the music aspect to Mannheim Heidelberg International Film Festival, that they had a Mannheim meeting place. And there you only had first and second timer directors or producers, but they were coming with their projects, like a bit advanced, not first draft, it should be like third or fourth. So as the consultants, we were telling them how to develop it further, what kind of elements they can get from what country or what region in general. And I think that's why you need festivals, but specific events like that. Without them, I wouldn't have met Rura Nasser from Jordan. That is now a big producer in Jordan. I met her 10 years ago there. Or I wouldn't have met people from Colombia, Cuba, producers that they are doing good stuff. So you need specific events in these festivals for co-productions. And I think that's an extremely nice opportunity you all have now here.
Yes.
You can start doing that now.
Yes, and the main theme here is the learning curve, right? The American system is a very particular system, which is different than the European system or the French system, et cetera, et cetera. So these platforms like the Red Sea Film Festival are great opportunities to meet. How for the Saudi audience and from the audience in the region, how would you suggest or would you tell them to help them? How can they learn about how the system works in other places? Are there incentives and programs in schools that you know of here? Do you have ideas, do you have suggestions for people in the audience who are looking to take on this learning curve and learn the business from a different side of the world?
For me?
Do the legwork and the homework, I said. So that's for you.
Well, I know in KSA, I know there's a lot of programs being initiated by the Film Commission, and also Alola and NEOM are not just production hubs. They're not just providing incentives for production, but they're also spending a lot of money on talent development. So you are going to hear over the coming months and longer about a bunch of different programs for talent development and also for incentives and support for filmmakers, producers, writers. And what I'm liking is that it's not just about above-the-line talent. I'm seeing a lot of programs being developed also for below-the-line talent, for art directors and production designers and editors and cinematographers. And because it's an ecosystem that doesn't exist, that has to be built in 3 to 5 years. And instead of relying on foreign crew and the film we're shooting, the film we're shooting now. I'm actually shooting 2 films right now. One is completely Saudi in terms of the crew and maybe there's 2 or 3 Egyptians, but everybody else is Saudi. Obviously, all the actors. It's a smaller budget, more independent film. The other one is a bigger budget. We've had to shoot in locations where there's no. I mean, we shot in NEOM, which is fantastic, and Tabuk, but we've had to bring in 100+ crew from outside of the kingdom. Now that's in years. I think for it to be cost effective, for us to be competitive, I think there's going to have to be local resources, vendors, equipment rentals companies, crew, below the line crew. So it's going to take time, but I think that it's no good if everybody's only interested in being a director, right? There has to be a whole ecosystem that's put in place. So that is happening, but it's going to take years, I think. Yeah.
He's very right, if I can say just one thing, David, because that's why I'm passionate about education. A prime example of what he just described is Greece, that also has 40% cash rebate. But the moment we had last summer, 2021 summer, Knives Out 2 and The Greek Freak being shot at the same time in Greece, we were out of crew. So that's something you can learn from and invest here, as he says, into creating crew. You need producers, line producers, production managers, you need all of these people. You don't have to bring them from abroad every time, like we brought in Greece, from Romania because we're out of crew. Yeah, so you have to do that now. I think it will take time, but then you will be a hub, really, for co-productions.
You know what this region really needs? A below-the-line agency. I think this is so crucial. I think it's
absolutely.
Yeah. And many other things, but anyway, I don't want to take too much time because I don't know if you want to open it to the audience, but that's.
I was just going to say that there are also organizations out there that could be helpful to everybody. There are groups like AFCI, the Association of Film Commissioners International, that always has great information, is great about connectivity. Those of us that are a part of the PGA, the Producers Guild, we have an international committee that is growing every day, especially looking at members coming from the MENA region, coming from Asia. That's all being built up, and there's some of these groups. There's more accessibility there than one would imagine. It's a great place to continue to educate yourself and figure out what actually is going on a regular basis. And there's more organizations out there like that I'd love to see people use. I'd love to see be a part of these type of events more. But a lot of good information can be found there for people who don't have the intimate connectivity that some of us have.
Very cool. On that note, we'll open it up to the audience. Any question? Yes, sir.
I have a question for Mohammed first. Like you mentioned, Saudi films are sort of struggling in the box office and stuff like that. So, thank you. So my question is, have you ever seen sort of genre films like horror, thriller, like those films being maybe the key to sort of bringing people to the audience? Because people seem to watch a lot of horror films and thriller films from Hollywood when in Dubai. I live in Dubai, so in Dubai and Saudi and the Arab world. So maybe that is something. Have you ever considered that? I know you've produced a horror film or two, so maybe that's a question I wanted to ask you. And in general, I wanted to also ask, in terms of co-productions, like, have you guys ever considered sort of doing bilingual films, or something that could be useful to an Arabic audience, but also like something that can reach out? Because that's, I think, a great model of like expanding the base of. So maybe your thoughts on those two things. Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, the two horror films, I try to kind of drop them from my CV because they didn't work so well. But anyway, let's talk about the others. I think genre is a great idea. I think, yes, when most films, the Arab world now it maybe produces 100 to 120 feature narrative films. Maybe like 40 in Egypt and 80 or 70 like the rest of the Arab world. And most of these are auteur, art house films that don't find an audience outside of festivals. Maybe on streaming sometimes. But when you look at what audiences are consuming, and if you take the biggest market, which is here, it's now become the biggest market in terms of box office by a long way. The things that are really working are Hollywood films, Bollywood, and Egyptian comedies. And I'm not even saying Egyptian films in general. So you can, there was this like $7 million budget, epic Egyptian film that broke the records in Egypt, right? More than, I think, almost 2 million admissions or 1.7 million admissions, something like that. And then, you compare that to what it did here in KSA with some much, much smaller comedies that, cost maybe a fraction of that and did so much better. So what works in Saudi Arabia are Hollywood tentpoles, Bollywood films, and Egyptian comedies. Now, how do we change that? How does a Saudi cinema, for example, find a market share? Yes, I think genre is key, but the problem is that when you try to produce an action film here, the local audience will always say, why would I want to watch a local action film? I can see the best action film made by Hollywood, and it's going to be so much better. So we have to try to make better genre films. And I'm not saying that, I'm not discouraging people from making their auteur art house films, which I love to do because I produce so many of them. But that is how you create an industry. I think it starts with studios that put a strategy for development and how do we develop a slate that is commercially viable. How can we market it in the right way? Because marketing is also something that is completely missing from the distribution strategies and the release strategies that I'm seeing by local distributors. I mean, there's hardly any marketing. I see distributors that say, the producer sends me the poster and the trailer a week before release and they expect me to make money. How does that work? It can't. So it's yes, genre is definitely one of the answers, but it's not the only one. Yeah. Yes, of course, a good script, I think, is more than anything, yeah.
Well, I can tell you guys from the distributor and from the exhibitor point of view, I run in Qatar Cinemas about 65 screens. And, we have the numbers right now for you guys, just to give you an example. One of the films that was out of Keef's, correct me if I'm right with my translation, is a Keef Tasmoni Ajib, Arabic film. It's been 3 weeks right now. We're looking at about admission just in Dubai because we have a structure only in Dubai, not in Saudi Arabia. That was 85,000 admission. That's a big number, guys. Another film that right after that was Al Rajol. Rajol I'm looking at right now, about 36,000 admission in 2 weeks. Now, in 4 years of running the exhibitor side of it, what we see, and we're talking about the Arabic films, 2018, we have a lot of films were coming out, and we were doing good numbers. What works in the cinema side of it, theatrical side of it, is the big blockbusters with, typical with the big cast, After COVID, pre-COVID, obviously OTT took over, but what we see, the independent films which could not get onto the cinemas, we start screening those films, we start releasing those films. But for those films, what we can, as exhibitors, a lot of producers will come and they push us to release the films. For us to give you the screen is not a problem. But if there's no marketing behind, for us, and there's no footfall there, it does not help. So this is one thing we, as an exhibitor and also distributor, and people think just a distributor is going to pick up your film and is going to put in a P&E money. The producers has to work hard to also to push their film really well in order to market the film. Distributor can do much because distributor is not releasing one film. He's got slates of film that he's putting in. So the producers' effort for themselves to market the film, especially when we talk about the GCC, and having Saudi on the board, right now we have, I believe the numbers are about 160 cinemas or 160 screens, and it's increasing monthly. So the numbers from the distributor point of view and from the exhibitor point of view, this is a great market for the Arabic films to be there. So the math and the commerce, if it's $500,000 or $1 million films, their numbers are coming up in a very great ways. So this is a great news as well, and I think it's a great platform from Red Sea to bring all the producers together. Absolutely. And the young films producers together. But it's very important also to educate. One thing that we see as well, we have a great platforms in terms of Red Sea and also Doha Film Festival and Dubai. They talk about production, they talk about producing, they talk about polish, but nobody talks about once the films are done, how are you going to market the film, how are you going to distribute the film, whether theatrically and also OTT. So that's, what I would say. So there's a good news for the Arabic films and Arabic cinemas is that, and especially for the investors, would she urge the investor that this is the time to invest in the Arabic film because the numbers, and I can show you the numbers speaks for itself.
Thank you.
So that, actually it's a question of, for me education is king, for him production is king, and for him distribution is king, in a way. I think we didn't touch on the topic of what really essentially is a co-production, which is partners coming together, contributing for the same product. And what does it mean contributing and how much everyone contributes? All of these are things that I think we didn't touch because it's very short time. But you have to really make your research of what it really means to co-produce. Because I've been in those co-production labs and I've seen especially the triplet of a writer, director, producer, which never works, by the way. If any of you is here and is a writer, director, producer, find a producer. If you go to a co-production lab with your project, you have to know exactly what it means that you're looking for specific partners to contribute to your project. Why is it interesting, your story, to them? What exactly do you want them to contribute to you? All of these things, please study them now before you end up, with any of us telling you in a one-on-one 10-minute meeting, you are not ready yet. Be ready and then go to those labs, I would say.
Sure.
Thanks for your talk. I have a question. Aside from financial contribution that this co-production could bring, I wonder if there are other benefit, very concrete benefit that could bring to project co-production between different countries. For example, is the quality of a movie that produced between a couple of countries internationally is better in concrete terms, in terms of financial returns or in terms of festival reception compared to the movie that produced locally? Because I know that there are some, for example, if you want to co-produce film, sometimes it takes lots of years. Even for big names, it takes 5-6 years. And sometimes you need to do compromise, artistic compromise, especially if you are from different countries, you want to produce global culture. You need to think about global culture. Sometimes you need to compromise your local sensitives, your local ideas to make it like globally interesting for everybody. So I'm just curious to know if what are the concrete benefits of doing co-production movies aside from financial contribution? If you,
I think it would depend on the project. But is that a question for a specific panelist or for? Please, yeah, Livia.
Yes. So when you look, so if you put aside the financial benefits of doing the co-production, so if you focus only on the artistic, the idea is not to make what you would call a global film. It's not, the idea is not to betray a culture or to make a Hollywood product, because Hollywood does it already. The idea is to have insights of how other audiences would perceive the film while still remaining true to your art and to what you want to tell. The festivals are not interested in something that would blend and that would fit the standards of a film that you can see in an American film. The idea is not to adapt to other standards. The idea is to hear the perception a festival or other audience would have on the film and to make it more appealing for audience while it's still being true to the culture that you're portraying and the arts, the specificities of your art. So I don't know if it's clear, but the idea, yeah, is not to renounce a culture just to fit into a kind of mode.
Hi guys, thank you so much for your time, first of all. In co-production, we work with so many different people, with so many different skill sets. So I actually wanted to ask you from a professional and a personal perspective, how do you deal with conflict and challenges working region to region and also just working with different people, like from your personal experience? What have you learned, either like from a mistake or like an all is lost moment or like a real challenge, like how do we overcome all these different things and factors that we work with in co-production? Because it can be very overwhelming sometimes.
I could simply say that you know the poor decisions that I've made in the past were because I didn't know my partners well enough. I didn't know them well enough. I didn't have a good enough working relationship with them to overcome some of those hurdles, which could be big and super small, you know, and only did I realize, and again, I'm just speaking personally here, did I realize that when I had a rapport with somebody where I could just sit and talk to them like two friends sitting on a couch talking, only when I was in that kind of environment would I be able to accomplish and get over a number of these roadblocks. I mean, I do a lot of business in Asia, I do a lot of business in the Middle East, and you know, and again, it took me a lot of time, energy, and airplane mileage, you know, to get comfortable enough and start to be able to call, you know, associates, friends, and then I was able to make the right decisions, and that helped me tremendously. But it took a ton of effort and time and energy. But you got to put that kind of time and energy in anything that you actually care about and that you're passionate about. So for me, it was all 100% worth it. And now, you know, a lot of my partners in this region and beyond are people that are like my family. You know, I just went to one of my partner from here, from Saudi, to his wedding in Athens about a month and a half ago. And, you know, and that's what it takes for us to be able to overcome those type of hurdles.
I would also add, if you can avoid having 5 co-producers, I think it's a good thing, because they also, the co-production territories come with spending requirements that make it very complicated, and sometimes when you end up with so many co-producers, it actually ends up raising your budget quite a lot, and complicating things legally in terms of co-production agreements and treaties. And if you do need to have multiple co-producers, I think you need to have a delegate producer, somebody who is leading the project, who can really orchestrate those relationships well. Because of that, I've been in projects before where there's just nobody taking the lead, and things take forever and they don't get done. And or if there's a delegate producer that is too, I don't want to say weak, but just too indecisive or is too considerate of the others. You know, sometimes you just need somebody who really takes charge when the time comes. So, yeah.
Yeah, you have to waste your time in order to learn how not to waste your time.
Building relationships.
Yeah.
I have a question probably for Mohammed mostly, but to all of you. That kind of bounces off of something that George said before. I've seen that in Austrian, German, Swiss co-productions so much that the script meddling, just Austrian films that would have worked marvelously before the Germans got involved, and then just didn't really work for Austrian audiences anymore, but
They
really
should be
did
choosing
well
their partners
for
wisely.
German audiences, in a way. How do you see that as a challenge in the Arab world, to protect the vision, the script, but still try to make it bigger and appeal to a broader audience across the region? Or is that not as much of a challenge at all?
To me, it will always be a challenge. You can say more specific about this later. Because we're not just in the entertainment business, we're in the people's business. So people are the problem. People are making the choices. Or people solve the problems and they make magnificent things all together, like, or a 2-second deal. So it's not really the region that, it's the people, if they know what they're doing, if they are experienced enough, committed enough, if they communicate clearly and with honesty, like honest filmmaking. It starts from there, and then honest producing and honest communication between them. If you know what you're doing and you have a nice filter of if the potential partner is really a good option of a potential partner to have, then after wasting a lot of time of wrong choices, you will start making the right choices. So it's a people's issue. It's not really a regional thing, but you can say if you notice something here.
No, I think you've answered it really well. It took me again 2 seconds to agree with you and decide not to answer. So.
Thank you. Hi, how are you? I have more of like a technical question. So what are some of the lessons learned that you have for us as we set up a co-production, whether it's between kind of like Arab countries or if it's EMEA, between the Middle East and kind of like Europe? Thank you.
So in terms of what's, of the technicality of the co-production between Europe and Saudi Arabia, what we can bring as a French co-producers is mostly to benefit from the French financial system, which is a lot based on soft money, so the CNC, Aide au Cinéma du Monde, or like regional funds that are based on the spending on the territory. What could be enhanced in terms of cooperation between the countries would be an agreement between France and Saudi Arabia, which would allow a film to qualify for the French TV obligations, which are a really important part of financing in France. So just to sum it up, the French TV have quota obligation for European content, and an agreement would allow for Saudi crew to qualify as European. So that is what France has a treaty with Lebanon, for instance, and we've been working on some Lebanese film that benefited from this system. Another example is Elias Souleiman's films, It Must Be Heaven, which was partly shot in Paris. So it was a co-production between Lebanon, France, and with the participation of the Doha Film Institute as well. So yeah, basically there's a first step that is a financial advantage of shooting in France, obtaining tax credit and all the other sources of financing in France. That could be even more improved with further agreements between the countries. Another thing that you can access when you qualify is once the film is released in France, to obtain what you call the fonds de soutien, which is based on the admissions of the film in France, and it's a further revenue for the film and for the production company, which then reinvest the money in their following films. So basically, this is what you can hope to obtain by doing a co-production with France, and then all the other European countries have their own system to enhance these possibilities. But this needs to have further, this needs to be improved with further cooperation between the countries.
And just on that point, you mentioned the treaty with Lebanon. Is there such a treaty with Saudi, or do you see something in the works in that regard?
I don't know about anything in the works, but yes, there's a treaty between France and Lebanon. And I think in the region, it's the only country that has a treaty. And Israel.
Egypt as well.
Yeah.
We have a treaty with France. Yeah.
Since you mentioned the word technicality, I have to say, from my observation, the number one thing that attracts good co-producers is a realistic budget. So if you are doing a film that, like I've seen a film here that is being pitched, which is a very, very artsy film, and it's asking around 3 million, I think you can do that for 300,000, for example. So, or if you are from France, you can do it for 1.2. You don't need 3. So if you start having a realistic budget, you can attract very quickly the right partners, if with a good pitch, I mean. So that's the first technicality I would be cautious about before embarking on your co-production journey.
Anyone else? Right there in yellow.
Hi there. I have a question for George about the talent agency. How do you think that talent agencies could help Saudi Arabia? Because we have very few over here, and I think the concept of having a talent agent is not very much understood. So how can that help a writer, especially in their career?
Can you repeat the last phrase?
How can a talent agent help a writer?
A writer?
Yeah, and you're done.
Oh, a literary agency, you mean now?
A screenwriter.
Well, when it comes to the agents and the middle people, the matchmakers, which actually agents are matchmakers and people that they have to find work for the talent they represent, really. You know, these words like executive producer, agent, all of that, they all come from LA, really, from a century ago. So they are not really existing here or are necessary here in a way that it is so necessary over there. Okay. So you have to maybe refine the definition in order to say, what do I need a talent agent for here to exist, first of all, and then to help me as a writer. I would say again, because we're in the people's business, you need someone who, I love cinema, that's why I started the business, and I love music in film, that's why I started my business. So they have to love, you know, scripts and cinema and series, whatever. And they have to be committed themselves. And yeah, some people are very good in what they're doing because they care about the talent, they want to nurture them, they want to mentor them and guide them in a strategic way to do right choices together and find them work. But this also means that you have to rely to a person that knows what they're doing. Like you have to rely as a majority producer on finding a minority co-producer that knows what they're doing. It's the same thing. Maybe it's not necessary yet in that way that you put it. It's necessary for producers to have a company that has a pool of talent they represent, and together they are trying to discover which is the best talent for their potential project. Like a roster, you know, a roster of options. But if you see it as an artist, if you need an agent, I would say no. You know, no talent needs an agent until they reach the point that they need representation to find more work. For his perspective, they need just a pool of options. Like they need a pool of post-production facilities. And they go to the film commission of any country and they say, what are the post-production facilities in Switzerland? And they give them a list. That's why you need maybe an agency here for writers, directors. And
one last question over here.
Not sorry. Where?
Hi, how are you? Good to see you, Mohammed. I'm Elijah Long, film producer from America. I produce films like Rambo, Last Blood. I did Tesla. I recently moved to the region to produce in this region. I recently did something in Abu Dhabi, and my question is, do you think unions will come into play at all in this region when it comes to behind the camera and rates and different things like that? Do you think that's something that will kind of transfer over to this region?
Hopefully not too soon.
Okay.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as we don't have SAG here, it's fine. No, I mean, we have unions in Egypt, but they don't, yeah, I mean, they're not very strong in terms of like regulating like minimum wages and working conditions. And so, I mean, we have really, I would almost say inhumane working conditions for the cinema sector in Egypt, where you have crews that are working sometimes 18, 20-hour days for consecutive days. So it's, so I would actually welcome that. No, I mean, on the series side, I would welcome a more structured, unionized industry where where people are getting their rights, their fair rights, and also because sometimes they can also protect the producer. So it's no, I think it's going to happen. There has to be enough critical mass. I think there's just not enough people in some countries that are. Sorry, did someone say something? Anyway, so when there's enough people working in this industry in Saudi Arabia, for example, I think there's going to be a need for it. So I think it's gonna be a natural evolution. But yeah, no, thank you for mentioning that, Elijah, and good to see you. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on that?
We'll wrap it up, maybe. Yeah. Guys, thank you for coming, and we're all here, and we're all excited to be here, as we all said, and we're accessible for all of you at any point.
Thank you for joining us. In about 30 minutes, we're going to have another session about opportunities in the region. So please stay, or if you leave, come back and join us for the next session.